In this presentation, we're going to look at the administrative process of water use groups. Water rights are grouped together based on the attributes of the right, including the place, period, and nature of use. Water use groups are an administrative tool to organize the records of the state engineer. Water use groups are intended to represent supplemental rights and their related uses. Please note that water use groups on the division's website may not be 100% correct due to data entry errors or extraneous groups due to a database conversion in 2006. If you believe there's an error in a water use group, please send a written request to the state engineer's office. The request should include a statement as to how the submitter believes the database should be modified. So let's start with an example of supplemental sources. Let's say you have rights to a surface source and a well to irrigate a piece of property. In May, when there's plenty of surface water available, you have enough to water the whole field using the surface source. In June, surface water is less prevalent, so you supplement it with some well water. In July, there's even less surface water available, so more water is needed to meet the duty value. Finally, in August, the surface source dries up and the well provides all of the water to irrigate the field. The surface water and well are used as supplemental sources to irrigate the field. Water rights can be grouped together based on common place, period, and types of use. If two water rights share the same point of diversion, should they be in the same water use group? Not necessarily. So what is a water use group? A water use group is a grouping of water rights usually based on the common beneficial use of the water. The paper file and the database should be used to get a full picture of water rights and their groups. All water rights have a specific beneficial use, and each water right is in at least one water use group. Water rights may belong to multiple water use groups. Each water use group represents a unique beneficial use and identifies water rights used to fulfill that use. Water use groups define a place or places of use, a period or periods of use, and beneficial use or nature of use of the water right within that group. Water use groups can contain one water right or many. Water use groups are not typically structured based on points of diversion, nor are they structured around ownership. There may be multiple points of diversion, both surface and underground, for water rights listed in a water use group. Water use groups may also contain multiple owners. All water use groups are defined by a number, seen here as Water Use Group 628294. Water use groups will define a place of use. This is where the water right is authorized to be used and should be consistent with the water right file. The place of use may include more than one section or quarter section of land. Place of use is described by 40-acre tracts. In this example, the place of use has been highlighted. The authorized use in this example, irrigation for a quarter acre, is authorized to be used within the northeast quarter of the southwest quarter of Section 32, Township 36 South, Range 13 West. The water use group will also define the period of use, or the time interval during which water can be used. The period of use for a water right will vary based on the use as well as the location. Some uses, such as domestic and stock watering, may be year-round. Irrigation seasons may vary based on location, changing the period of use. Here, the period of use is highlighted. A typical irrigation period of use is April to October, as shown in this example. Water use groups will also define beneficial use, which is the purpose for diverting water. Beneficial use is measured according to the type of use occurring. For this example, the beneficial use is measured in acres of irrigation, domestic, and stock watering. Beneficial use is measured by the number of homes or equivalent livestock units. One of the most important things to remember when reviewing water rights is that beneficial use is the basis, measure, and limit of a water right. Here are common types of beneficial uses that you will see while reviewing water use groups. When discussing water use groups, there are certain terms that need to be understood. The sole supply of a water right defines the amount of beneficial use allowed under a particular water right when used alone and separate. A water right is limited by the sole supply, and many water rights will often contribute their beneficial uses to be used together in a water use group known as the group total. Beneficial use amounts define the contribution of a water right to the group and may also be referred to as the group contribution. If a water right is a part of multiple use groups, its sole supply is the sum of its beneficial use amounts. So why do we use water use groups? Water use groups allow us to account for the limits and measures of each water right while creating an index of water rights that are serving a unique beneficial use. Water use groups can identify what water rights are being used on a parcel of ground, how the water is being used, and when it is being used. Water use groups allow us to account for all the uses of water in the state. So how does the public use and interact with water use groups? If you're buying a water right, water use groups will be a key indicator of the value of the right. Care should be taken to understand the sole supply of a water right rather than the group total. Groups may reflect more use than an individual water right in a group. In filing a change application, only the defined sole supply limits of a water right can be changed, not the entire group or group total. If more than one water right is a part of the water use group, and if a sole supply has not been defined for a water right, a change application may not be filed. Current exceptions include municipal water rights, change applications which include all water rights within a water use group, and change applications that do not change the nature of use. Sole supply for a water right must also be defined in order to file a segregation. The process to declare the sole supply of a water right will be covered later in this video. Here are some examples of how water groups will look in our database. This water use group contains two water rights, 51-4859 and 51-8625. The beneficial use amounts for 51-4859 is 13.62 acres of irrigation. Water right 51-8625 is limited to 1.25 acres of irrigation. Here you can see the group total, which is the total of the two water rights. This is the maximum amount of irrigation or beneficial use in this water use group. The group total, as well as the period of use, should be consistent in our database. Now let's look at a more complicated water use group, water use group 600013. You can see that there are several water rights in this group. In this case, we are viewing the database entry for 71-229, which has a defined sole supply of 20 acres. As you can see, the group total is 755.98 acres. There are also several defined places of use. When you look at the map view in our database, this is what you'll see. The red squares indicate well locations, and the green shaded areas indicate the approved places of use. If you dig deeper into the documents on the file, each of the water rights in the group supply water to specific pieces of ground within the place of use. The sole supply for 71-229 is allocated to this chunk of ground. The sole supply for the other rights are allocated to different areas. These areas highlighted in red aren't covered by any water rights in the group. Why? As we see, the sole supply is less than the group total. In this case, the applicant has been approved for crop rotations, and they have 127.42 acres of ground that are not in production at any given time. The applicant is required to inform our office each year of what ground will be in production. They are also required to meter each of their sources and report the meter data annually to our office. This example highlights the importance of reading through the documents on the water right file to gain a deeper understanding of how the water rights are approved and used. Here's an example of a large water use group used for a municipal system. This water use group includes all the water rights used within the service area of the municipality. A water right from a different water right drainage may be included in the water use group. This could be from a municipal right, or it may be associated with a federal water project that imports water from another basin to be used as a supplemental supply for the described uses. As you begin to attempt to understand a water use group, it is important to review several types of documents. These can typically be found on the database and should always be found on the physical file. These documents will help clarify the value or limitations of the water rights within a group. If you find a water use group that has private water rights as well as water rights listed from an irrigation company, this is an error that you can ask the division to correct. Shares in an irrigation company can move throughout the company's service area without a water right change application. The previous owners of the water right may have owned shares in the irrigation company that were used to supplement the use described in the group. In order to understand supplemental rights, a review of the file is necessary. Irrigation shares should now be represented through a note at the bottom of the water uses as shown here. As I've said, the entries in the database may not be 100% correct. Water use groups may have errors due to data entry or database conversions. If you find any errors in the database, please let us know. We want any errors to be corrected. Now let's look at water use groups where beneficial use amounts have not been defined. Here's a water use group with a group total and period of use. However, the beneficial use amounts are listed as unevaluated acres. It is important to define the beneficial use amounts in order to file a segregation or a change application. To define beneficial use amounts, you will need to follow Administrative Rule R655-16. If you believe our records are incorrect or incomplete, you may file a written request for corrections to be made. You may also need to file a declaration of beneficial use or an application for apportionment of beneficial use amounts. A declaration of beneficial use amounts will need to be filed to declare the beneficial use amounts of some or all of the individual water rights within a water use group. If multiple owners are present, each owner of the water rights in the group must sign. This allows the division to see that each owner agrees with the proposed quantification of the water rights. If all of the owners do not sign the declaration of beneficial use, the division cannot accept the proposed quantification of the water rights. Within the water use group, once the declaration has been completed, signed, and submitted, the division will review and modify the water rights records if everything is in order. This is what a declaration of beneficial use form looks like. Please note there is a place at the bottom of the front page for each owner to initial as well as signature lines on subsequent pages. We frequently see applications on which the applicants miss the initials on the front page, so please double check that to make sure the process goes as smoothly as possible. An application for apportionment is the last method to define beneficial use amounts for water rights within a water use group. This is a more complicated method that should only be used when the applicant has exhausted all reasonable efforts to complete a declaration. An apportionment can be used when the owner or owners believe that the database incorrectly reflects their right, or when there is an immediate need or rush for an administrative action on an application or proof of beneficial use. An apportionment is a request to the division to review the information and make a recommendation for how the water rights should be quantified within the group. The division will review the water right file, attempt to contact each owner, and make a recommendation on how to apportion the beneficial use amounts amongst the water rights in the group. The division will then notify all the parties of the apportionment recommendation and allow the parties to comment on any errors they may find. This method should only be used as a final attempt to establish beneficial use amounts, as it can be lengthy and complicated. When filing an application for apportionment, the applicant must document attempts to reach the other parties or successors in interest, the reasons other parties or successors in interest cannot be identified or contacted, or that one or more of the parties or successors in interest refuse to participate in the declaration of beneficial use. Upon accepting the application, the state engineer will notify all parties and issue a request for information. All parties have 30 days to submit information. After that, the state engineer will review all information received and in the water right files and issue a preliminary apportionment, which will be sent to all parties. The state engineer will allow 30 more days for the parties to protest the preliminary apportionment and/or submit additional information. If necessary, the state engineer may hold a hearing. The state engineer will then issue an order of the state engineer for final apportionment, which will define the sole supplies of the water rights in the water use group. The parties have 20 days to request reconsideration or 30 days to request de novo review in the appropriate district court. Ultimately, a water use group may be altered as a result of filing a declaration of beneficial use amounts, a completed application for apportionment of beneficial use amounts, as well as resolved errors not consistent with the state engineer's records. If you have any questions or problems at any point in this process, please contact the division or come into any of our offices to review the physical files or talk with the staff members.